our citizens.
And welcome to HSTV News. I am Atricia Gondo and these are the headlines. Government pays millions to Delish Nguwaya's geogenics. Violence rocks ZEC meeting at the townhouse. Hundreds demonstrate against sanctions at the US Embassy in Harare. Now for the news in greater detail. Government has paid Pomona Waste Management its bill running over millions of United States dollars after the Harare City Council distanced itself from the waste-to-energy deal, citing viability problems. The murky deal, which has seen council paying to the dump waste site at their own dump site after ceding control to geogenics, is expected to cost the local authority 344 million United States dollars before the city gets any benefits. Harare has said it's a bad deal and has pulled out, but government, on the other hand, says it's a good deal and forced Mayor Jacob Mafume's local authority to stay put. Gaddafi Wells filed this report.
Government has stepped in to honor the huge bill owed to Pomona Waste Management by Harare City Council, after the city fathers refused to play ball, alleging the deal was unsustainable. Harare pulled out of the waste-to-energy deal and wrote a letter to Pomona Waste Management, communicating their intention to pull out of the controversial deal, but were stopped in their tracks through a directive by local government minister July Moyo. During a tour of the dump site, Deputy Minister of Local Government Miriam Chombo said government was now paying the bill, which runs to close to 1 million United States dollars per month.
Those Harare City Council was informed as one of the participants in the contract. But as the PSA said, it's a partnership here, and them not being physically here, they are here. And me being the Deputy Minister of Local Government, it means I'm also representing all the 92 local authorities, Harare City Council involved.
The tour, which was meant to be attended by cabinet ministers, was snubbed by Harare Mayor Jacob Mafume, raising fears the working relationship between the two parties had broken down irretrievably. However, Information Permanent Secretary Nick Mangwana said all was well.
The short answer is that Pomona and the council and the city council have an agreement. They have a contract. So they are working in accordance with the terms of that contract and agreement. That normally happens in every civilized society, in every orderly society, that when you have a contract, each party to that contract is expected to honor its obligation. And that's how it...
Pomona Waste Management said the company was proceeding with works which would see electricity being pushed on the national grid in the next 5 years. The work would include building an incinerator, refuse sorting plant and ponds to collect toxic waste liquid which has the potential to contaminate Harare's drinking water.
This is highly acidic water, which is coming from the waste. And our intention is to actually clean this water up, purify it, and then use it in the waste-to-energy plant. So you find we've got a small leached ponds within, but this is the big one. This is the water followed a particular gradient and decided to settle here. So this is our black water.
7 meters, but this is the most dangerous point in Pomona dam site.
because the water don't have the border. From here going to the city, to going to the clean water which everyone drink. The first challenges for us is to remove this water, to preparing the new pools with all standards and water treatment system, because the water is most dangerous point, because from underground going everyone. The waste staying here, but water going, the water is the more dangerous point of Pomona Dam site, because from underground the water going to the city, to all places we use for landscaping, for drinking, for everything, and it's more and more dangerous. The first challenges is we should to remove this water, to create the new pools, to remove from here to new pools, and after to put in water treatment system.
Chairman of Geogenics Pomona Waste Management, Delish Nguwaya, played a backseat role, only standing up to thank the visitors.
As you tour the site, you will notice tremendous work that we are doing here in initial phases of the project. Your presence here is of utmost importance to us, as it shows us full support that we have from the government of Zimbabwe, which we highly appreciate very much. I will not take much of your time, as you are busy people with busy schedules. I'll now hand over to my team to take you through the tour of the site and get appreciation of what we are doing. Feel free to ask questions along the way. Once again, I say welcome to Pomona Waste Management Site and thank you for the visit.
The deal has been dubbed the rubbish deal made in hell, but government has stuck to its guns, saying this will not be allowed to fail. Mafume has insisted the deal is unfair because it will bleed the local authority $344 million United States dollars before any returns could be realized. Residents are also unhappy and have since challenged it in court. Reporting for HSTV News, Gaddafi Wells, Pomona Dam Site.
Hundreds of people who stay in the Pomona Dam site face eviction following the murky deal. The people who have been earning their keep are getting kicked out, while others are offered employment. Joyce Zigiti gives us more.
512 people staying and feeding off Pomona Dam site face eviction following the takeover by Pomona Waste Management from Harare City Council in a murky deal. The people who stay in the dam site earn a living through scavenging for recyclable waste and selling it to waste management companies. Government has promised to provide accommodation for those who will be affected by the eviction. National Housing Minister Daniel Garwe, already struggling to build houses for civil servants, said the government had a plan.
Government policy is to ensure that no place and no one is left behind in terms of provision of decent, affordable and modern accommodation. We have taken note of this situation. We'll ensure that we identify a suitable area where we will relocate them and live like everybody else.
Pomona Waste Management said they will employ some of the scavengers to sort the waste at the sorting plant once it's built.
We are not yet employing them because they are sorting their places at the sorting plant, because their skill is in sorting waste, which is separation of the recyclable from the non-recyclable. So the sorting plant is yet to be there.
Pomona Dam site is an economy on its own, supporting a number of families who fear that the coming of Pomona Waste Management will push them out of their earnings. On the other hand, the ZANU-PF government promised to build 1.5 million houses in its 2018 election manifesto, but has been battling with the promise. Joyce Tigiti, HSTV News.
Vice President Constantino Chiwenga has said Zimbabwe was not going to change from its path regardless of sanctions against it. In a video released by the Office of the President and Cabinet, Chiwenga said removing sanctions would give Zimbabweans a chance.
We call, press and reiterate that these illegal sanctions must go. The people and government of Zimbabwe deserve a chance. We are not and will never yield to the sanctions, conditioning, and strangulating effect. We will never give up on sacred ideals and goals of our protracted armed liberation struggle. We will not abandon the path we have chosen for ourselves as a sovereign people to develop, modernize, and industrialize our great motherland, Zimbabwe, using our own capabilities, resources, and international goodwill. Fellow Zimbabweans, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year's SADC Anti-Sanction Day, enhancing Zimbabwe's resilience through economic development, engagement and re-engagement, is most fitting and inspiring. It exhorts us all to continue building our resilience, adaptive capacities, and strategies in the fight against this coercive measure.
Political violence raised its ugly head right under the nose of the police when a Zimbabwe Electoral Commission meeting turned chaotic. ZANU-PF supporters were angry that Nelson Chamisa's CCC once more seats in Harare City Council, their traditional stronghold, while the ruling party wants even less seats. I attended the meeting and filed this report. A Zimbabwe Electoral Commission all-stakeholders meeting on delimitation in Harare had to be stopped and anti-riot police called in after clashes between ruling ZANU-PF and opposition CCC supporters clashed over proposed number of wards for Harare. The meeting became chaotic, forcing ZEC to abandon it and set a fresh date. Harare Mayor Jacob Mafume accused ZANU-PF of trying to use crowds to settle a scientific process of delimitation. He went after ZANU-PF Harare chairman Godwill's Masimiremba for trying to play politics.
We as Harare have made our presentation, and our presentation is that there should be 55 wards in Harare. One councillor, like in Harare South, is representing more people than is necessary. When we got to that point, our colleagues in ZANU-PF were not happy, and they started turning the whole event into a political rally and disrupting proceedings. But these things are for the intellect. We are supposed to present using papers, not crowds. We are going to make our presentation and make sure that the issues of council and the residents and the Harare voters are placed before ZEC. They wanted to disrupt a ZEC process and to make sure that nothing comes out of the consultations. We don't accept that. We want to make sure that we have fewer residents per councillor so that they can be effective representation and effective service delivery.
Unhappy ZANU-PF supporters turned their anger to the police, accusing them of siding with CCC while beating them up. They even called on the police to be disbanded as the drama unfolded. Other ZANU-PF supporters threatened to unleash violence against CCC, especially against Councillor Denford Gadziore, who they said was disrespectful and pushing for violence.
Especially the way they behaved, vachibvutira chairman we Harare province. Political violence. Political violence yavatotanga. Ihondo yavari kutotanga. Especially mfana kansero anonzi Steni Manyenga. Newe anonzi anu mfana wekuhopuru. Hondo yamuri kutanga yamuigone. Ende musatame na provincial chairman weZANU-PF. Muchita zvamaita izvi. Please, next time musazidzokorore zvamaita izvi. Muchatoona kuti tiri mabhurudogi zveshuwa.
Zvinozonetsa kuti uzoona someone akuita these acts of misconduct yekuti number one tikada kuti even age yava Masimirembo wanga vachitaura neage yaDenford Gadziore abvuta maiki zvikura kuti even muchivanhu chedu chaicho semaZimbabweans abuda atove munhu mwana akarashika.
The councillor, who is reported to have grabbed the microphone out of Masimirembo's hands, triggering chaos, defended himself, saying he only took the microphone to save it from violence.
And ndakubvutira Masimirembo my mic. As you are aware, tiri pa town house, pana pa mouse pedu. takainvitwa isu sema-councillors, ma-MPs nema-stakeholders kuti vauye titipe pfungwa dzedu. So takati tinofamba pfungwa dzedu. So patanga vanhu pava-objecta vamasemirembwa pane zvavanga vachitaura, vanhu vatanga kusimuka vachifamba kuya kumberi. Sekuziva kuti tiri patown house patiri isusu, ndangoende pavari ndikabata mic ndikaitambudza munhu weZEC ndichiitire kuti mic isadamagwa zvakare neproperties. Vamwe vanhu vaita fedha kutora macheya anga ari panze vachiisa mukati kuitira kuprotecta property.
The meeting has now been moved to a later date to accommodate ZANU-PF, who will have a congress in 2 days' time.
Nezvaitika izvi musangano wedu hauchakwanisa kufamba sezvanga zvakatarisirwa. Asi tawirirana neZEC kuti vachatipa rimwe date mangwana tine anti-sanctions. Vamwe tozoenda kucongress asi vhiki rinotevera tichakuudzai tichaita musangano iwoyu. Mawana mikana yokutondorodza pfungwa muchabvunza kusvika pamunodira. Ndatenda.
Pre-election violence has been on the increase ahead of the 2023 general elections, which will make or break political careers. ZANU-PF is going for broke, throwing caution into the wind in an effort to secure a second and final term for President Emmerson Mnangagwa, while Triple C leader Nelson Chamisa is doing all he can to upset the status quo. Reporting for HSTV, Atricia Gondo, Townhouse, Harare. Turning to the courts. Mary Mubaiwa, the former wife of Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, appeared in public for the first time since losing her hand. She escaped jail after the court cancelled a warrant of arrest which had been issued against her. Masi Mazira gives us the report at the Rotten Row Court.
The estranged wife of Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, Mary Mubaiwa, appeared in public for the first time since losing a hand in a medical-induced amputation when she appeared in court with a warrant of arrest hanging over her head. Magistrate Taurai Manuere overturned the warrant after submission from Mubaiwa's lawyer, Ray Sisitombe, that his client was not in willful default of court but was rather battling with her health and could not even move. Mubaiwa faces a number of cases before the courts, which include money laundering and attempted murder of the vice president. She was also recently convicted of fraud in a case she tried to upgrade her marriage with the vice president without his consent. Mubaiwa is expected back in court for the attempted case on the 29th of November, which she'll be back in court on October 28 for the money laundering case. She has since applied to be removed from remand, telling the court that the state has failed to give her a trial date within a reasonable time. Manuere said he will be ready with judgment on Mubaiwa's application then. Reporting for HSTV News, Maslin Mazura, Rotten Row Magistrates Courts.
Hundreds of people gathered outside the imposing walls of the U.S. Embassy in Harare to protest against sanctions. They came in state-owned Zupco buses to dance and sing against the sanctions, which the U.S. said will only go if Zimbabwe respects human rights and run credible polls. Government says the sanctions are nothing but a punishment against the people of Zimbabwe for taking back their land. Lady Gomera, in the thick of things, gives us the report.
The United States of America and the United Kingdom used social media to push back against the anti-sanctions fight by the Zimbabwean government in a series of events and solidarity from partners across Africa. The US instead said it was not sanctions killing the economy, but accused government for being wasteful and abusing state resources, resulting in the poverty of its people. Open quote. Unauthorized spending and no results. $840 million for Command Agriculture Program. $51 million to lease 3 planes never used. $80 million to recapitalize the state-owned Zimbabwe Consolidated Diamond Company. Close quote. Wrote the U.S. Harare Embassy on its official Twitter page. The UK also dismissed the sanctions talk, saying, open quote, to be absolutely clear, the UK government has targeted sanctions on 5 Zimbabwean officials and 1 entity for human rights violations and serious corruption. The 5 individuals are Owen Ngube, Isaac Moyo, Godwin Matanga, Anselm Sanyatwe, and Kudakwashe Tagwirei. The entity is Zimbabwe Defense Industries. These measures do not affect economic development. We want to see Zimbabwe succeed. Anything to suggest that UK wants to harm Zimbabwe or ordinary Zimbabweans is simply false, close quote, wrote the UK government. However, the Zimbabwe government upping its ante against sanctions, dismissing rebuttals with Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Monica Mchangwa, calling on the media to play their role of informing and educating the people on the misinformation and disinformation on sanctions.
The media has a very special role to inform, educate and entertain the nation on the misinformation and disinformation on sanctions peddled by the West and its allies, that these sanctions are targeted to a few individuals. I'm sure there's a lot more in this gallery who will talk about that fact, that when this narrative to say these sanctions are targeted to a few individuals, that is so wrong. I'm glad we have had so many people now who are prepared even to give a list of our own Zimbabweans who actually went out of their way to call for sanctions on their country. But I'm glad a lot more people now are realizing that sanctions are there and they are affecting our industry, they are affecting our people, they are affecting everything about this country. The media must unmask this big lie and expose the reality on the ground that the sanctions are choking. The lies are meant to turn us against each other and derail the development agenda. In this regard, I implore the media to conduct investigative journalism to expose the ways and the manner in which Zimbabweans have been affected by this evil. I also urge the media to take an editorial stance against illegal sanctions.
Public Service Chairman Vincent Ungwe said sanctions were affecting investment in the country and therefore there was need to rebrand the country.
Sanctions, in my view, do not just come as economic sanctions. There is a particular narrative that is always associated with sanctions, and it is a narrative of negativity. It is a narrative that says Zimbabwe must actually be painted out there as a country where you cannot go and do any business. Right? Now, so sanctions come with a certain brand. And that brand is externally determined. So it is also the duty of Zimbabweans using the estate that is gathered here today to ensure that the fight against sanctions is also accompanied by a certain rebranding of Zimbabwe so that we can move in the direction in which betterment lies for all of us.
Meanwhile, hordes of people were bussed to the United States Embassy, where they staged demonstrations outside against the sanctions. The demonstrators carried placards and banners denouncing the sanctions, which they say are hurting the ordinary people and the economy. Zimbabwe, through the Ministry of Information and Publicity Broadcasting Services, held the first session of the SADC Anti-Sanctions Summit, SAS 2022, under the theme of building media sector resilience and sustainable reforms that leave no one and no place behind. Hordes of people gathered here demonstrating against the imposition of sanctions on Zimbabwe by the US government. Nobody has come out of these imposing walls. The only response was through Twitter. Lady Gomera, outside the US Embassy, Harare.
On the back of the sanctions story and ahead of the 2023 general elections, New political parties have started to emerge, with one having been launched this afternoon at a press conference. A one-man political party, the Anti-National Corruption ANC, led by Ignatia Songori, has come to life.
The name of our political party is Anti-National Corruption, ANC in brackets. The name is derived from the party's philosophy. After realizing the staggering scale of corruption in the country, corruption can no longer be dealt with sufficiently under the government-created institutions alone, but need to be taken up to a political level where it can receive the attention and political will it deserves. We launched the ANC at a very difficult time in Zimbabwe's politics, where ZEC, the national electoral body, has hiked nomination fees beyond the reach of many small political parties and independent candidates, closing up the democratic space which otherwise ZEC are supposed to be advocating for.
Songori is determined to win the elections and not benefit from a possible fallout that might emerge after the polls. Indeed, the season is upon us. Thank you for joining the HSTV News Bulletin. I am Atricia Gondo, and good night.